I may have cut your head off
No,
a
that's
little
okay.
bit.
It records sound for a bit. Let's see what we got.
Oh, really? Okay.
I,
Is that it? Is
yeah.
that the one I got?
Yeah.
How'd that turn out?
Turns. Ow. Where's your mama, Angel? Where's your mama? Where is she? Ow. Ow. We probably look like bigger. We sound like bigger idiots. Where's your mama? Ow. Ow. Sing for us, Angel. Ow. Where's Sheila?
talking yesterday about self-care and torture. People with severe abuse. And you know what, there's a lot of directions that people go who have really serious injury, but there's, and betrayal and that kind of stuff. A lot of them head into the healing arts. And part of that is in reaction and response to what happened to them and the level of pain and stuff that they carry. And that they became caretakers, usually of their families, brothers and sisters. You'll find histories of them that they also take care of the neighborhood. What they'll do is somebody new comes in, they take over a pot of stew, or they'll take a cake or something. It's just what they do. So in a sense, they become an anchor for the community, because, God, I can remember doing that. And some of it had to do with heritage that I came out of on both sides of my family. But the other part of it really had to do with wanting to know what the territory was. So I carried a paranoid element that if I went and be nice to them, then they were going to be okay with us. I mean, there's anytime you find someone who's had a history of abuse doing that kind of stuff, there's an underlying piece to it around self-care that most of the time is missed. And the other part of that is a wish that they're going to be seen by someone and acknowledged for what the truth of what's going on. Most of the time they're not, because they don't give a clear message. It takes a long time for them to grow enough to realize, wait a minute, they got to tell somebody, because the secrets are really pretty major stuff. Maria is somebody who became an extremely competent nurse. One of the best nurses they had over at Children's and working with children with psychiatric problems. And the truth is that I heard about Maria from a man named Harvey that I worked with a long time ago on the Children's Psychiatric Unit. And he died later. However, most of the time, finding someone that they can work with who is willing to walk with them through that process and not be freaked out by it is not so easy in the psychotherapeutic field. And when you do get into this stuff, there are two things that need to take place when they do need an individual therapist. They can help ground them in and can, and Maria has that in the psychiatrist that she sees. Also, they've got to have a support community that can balance out that internal system that they carry, because that system and the resonance that we all carry in life gets reinforced. Because that's what we draw to us. That's why she drew Scott to her. Because with a pattern of abuse that she carries, the only resonance that she could pull to her is someone who abuses, until that pattern can be shifted and changed. And once that happens, then you can get free of it. Even if you finally break free of one and get divorced, without the work that needs to happen, you pull the same thing to you. It may be a different picture, but suddenly you find yourself in the same boat. Wonder, how the hell did I get here? This is not what I saw when I was looking. So growth is really important in this. Now, when Maria first came into this group, nobody could get near her other than Tanya, who was her friend. And Tanya was her anchor and point of safety so that she could begin this work. And Tanya's who brought her here. Children's would have paid for Maria's master's degree. They had a system set up to do that each semester, and she didn't do it. And there are a lot of reasons why that happened. Part of it is the abusive pattern. But she is and has been a leader in the field of eating disorders in that area of nursing. So there's nothing wrong with the professional aspect. People who are abused ordinarily jump up. If you look at do this way. physical body, emotional or astral body, mental body, spirit. People with severe abuse jump up into the mental body and into spirit. They get away from, they get away from the emotional body because they can't be present in it. They cannot be present in their own bodies around the emotional nature because there's just too much. And they have all kinds of defenses for that. They split off, they withdraw, they isolate, they retreat, they form barriers around contact in all kinds of ways. Now what Maria did is develop all these split off pieces and create this round table. And I can't remember whether that was in place when she came here or not. Was it? Yeah. So she did that herself. And so part of what happens, I really do need a pen. I need that for this, to show people, not a pen, but a marker.
Right here.
Oh, okay, Leslie, let me have that easel over here. Okay, great, thanks.
And you want this over there?
I need it, yeah, on this side, that'd be great. Because it's different from the old split personality stuff, multiple personality. I don't think Maria did a multiple personality split. She wasn't far from it, but she didn't do that. What she did is a different pattern, and fits a pattern of all abused people. And they may or may not stay connected consciously to these pieces. But what they do is they keep a line to them so that they're not so hard to pull in. Really bright people. Really bright people, if they go completely into a DID, dissociative process, that's a whole nother story about what happens with those folks. But people like Maria, here's what they did. So here's Maria. And so the only way she could survive was to send off these pieces. And she gave them names. And anytime stress came up, she just sent another one out. It was a way to deal with it. And all of these contain different kinds of feelings. And some of them are male and some of them are female. Now, and different amounts of energy go to different beings. When you have neglect or when you have abuse, this is what happens. People split, they leave. And so their vessel becomes really, there's a wonderful film by who played the father of the bride in the new film that came out? Huh? Steve Martin, that's it. Where, and I can't remember the name of it, but he had a family in a house and some people came to visit and they just stayed. And destroyed the house, basically. So what happens when you split off is you have an empty vessel. And all kinds of energies and all kinds of stuff can come in and they just take up residence until you clean out your house. Then these pieces can come back in. And that is the form of protection that we all create. Sometimes those are positive, sometimes they're negative, but mostly we put in the place of all this our fears and our anger and our betrayals and all the rest of that stuff, and some other kinds of woolly boogers too. And these all are pieces. Now with what Maria did, is she just simply created a round table. and everybody had a place at the table. And depending on what was going on with Maria, somebody would take the chairmanship of that board. And then they would tell her what to do. And she was be a real good girl and do that, whether it was be quiet, stay away, or whatever. When she came, this began to be pulled in a more constructive way. When she came here, none of us could get near her. When Jay walked in the first time, she took one look at him and went and hid behind Tanya. It scared the hell out of her. Because she doesn't know who she can trust. And she doesn't know where a point of safety is. And that, for the last 2 years, has been being developed. Is that your foot stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, there's been a lot of work on this, along with the medication she's on and the psychiatrist that she sees. And so too much stress, she just created another place. And so that has now been stopped. About 3 or 4 sessions ago, Maria, and she created with this group a safe place for the really wounded ones of these to go. And she carried it around. Every time she came to group, she brought this safe place that she created, and we could see it. It was a little like working in a sand tray, except it was on paper with art. And so whenever something happened, or she brought in another really, really wounded being part of this, they'd go to the safe house. And she was the only one that could get in. And there were very interesting pieces to that. There was really good food. There was a place that was a bath that was just the perfect temperature. There was a medical section. There was a playground. There was all kinds of things in that safe house area. And all of us supported. Then one day we did a piece of work, and all of a sudden people were able to play roles in a place that hadn't been able to happen. And then, more and more she'd come in. She's very clear about what she wants to work on, and it's just a matter of following through with that. Now, for Maria, the anchor was Tanya. And then it became me too, but particularly Tanya. And then, along with me, her psychiatrist. Now here's the scoop, you guys. When you're working with trauma and this kind of a process, you've got to, over a period of time, help facilitate what Moreno calls the second psychodramatic family. Because if you don't, you can't take this on. They have to have a system that knows what's happening and can balance it out and is willing to walk through the horror and the pain with it. And that's true really of all of us, but particularly someone who's had torture. I mean, Mark's had a hell of a lot of therapy. A lot. He's one of the most symbolic people that I've had in my group in a long time because he brings his own symbols in. You get somebody that brings in, bags of this stuff, and suddenly he brings one piece. Pay attention when that happens. Because that one piece is real critical and real important. The same thing is true of Maria. This time, first time I can ever remember, she didn't bring her safe house. Well, what does that mean? It means that she's really ready for us to become and engage in this part of her system, and we have a better chance of getting access to here. She's ready. Now, we've earned that right. She's done her work, but we've done ours too. The other thing is that she's learned that there are men in this world who won't hurt her. Mark, Dan, Sally, Jay. Last thing in this God's green earth that these men want to do is hurt Maria. And they all made that commitment to her. They weren't interested in that, and they'd help protect her in whatever way they could, especially when her work is happening. Now, we all know that Jay is a warrior, has a long history of that, not just in the native world, but in the military. So for her to be able to pull him into that inner circle. Now, there are a lot of ways to look at that inner circle last night. It's 4 winds, the 4 directions. They're all people who know how to to build a protective net. They're all people she has a solid connection to and that she would trust. And whatever else has happened, whenever in the past she's worked around the issue of her father, it's always been at the distance. Now she's at a place in her own growth where she can say, he's really sick. It's not that what he did to her was okay. He is really sick. And he needs some healing. She did not say that she forgave him. She said, and he needs some forgiveness. She didn't say she did it. It's just he needs some forgiveness. Now, whoever gives that can be God, can be himself. But when you go into a temple of healing, because that's what we're talking about here, which is a metaphysical framework and concept. The temples of healing are very important, and a framework around what, there's a whole, I could do probably 2 days lecture or more on temples of healing, and what they are, both positive temples and negative temples, which are not necessarily temples of healing, they're temples of destruction and separation. But this process that's going on with Maria, is a huge statement in her masculine nature. Okay? Because it means that she's separating herself out from her father and can acknowledge that there was not just negative but also some positive stuff and that she cares about him. So she sends him off to this temple that the 4 of you, or 3 of you who took him off, got to create. Now that has power, y'all. You set it up in a way that, by her instructions, that he not be hurt, that he be well taken care of, that healers be present, that he be nourished, that he be supported, and that he have his own counselors, people to help take care of him, and whatever his needs were, they would be met, so that he could heal. Now that's a gigantic move. It doesn't mean she can personally deal with him, but in bringing you guys into this system, she introduced a new element into this system called helpers. Powerful helpers. People that she trusted, people that she knew wouldn't hurt her, people that are kind and loving and caring, and who would do what she asked them to do and take care of it. And she let somebody play the role of her father, so that his energy came into this space, so that he could go and be healed. And when you go into those temples of healing, he can be in there for a long, long time. A long time. And it's a real gift. So I really want to acknowledge you, Maria, for the gift. Because it'll help free you. Babies, when they're born, love their parents. They just do. They are pure and they are innocent. They may have a hard time, they may be pissed off that they're in a little body. Some babies come in without awareness and they are pissed off. And there are others that come in that are just purely happy to be alive. And then whatever we do to them is what we do to them. But initially, babies love their parents. And sometimes so much crap happens that gets lost in the equation. But when you're working with people of severe abuse, don't ever forget that that's in there someplace. If you can get to it and do that piece, then it helps free this up. The other thing is, until they get this piece, the core, called Maria, comes to a place of enough healing within the framework of the trauma that she can shift the responsibility from them taking care of her to her suddenly taking care of them. And then she becomes what we call the solicitor or the chairman of the board. And at that point, she can send all these people off to bed because they need to rest. She can do all kinds of things. But only when she's had enough support and enough growth to get to that place. Until then, These guys run the show. And what is it Madeline that's your shrink? What Madeline did with this, which I'm really, I tell her, I said I was really happy with her for this, she put a stop to the more creation here. She just said, you can't do any more of that. Because when the fear comes up, Maria has a belief she doesn't know how to handle it, and she's handled it always by making another piece. And so when you put a stop to that, she gets to keep that energy. So instead of sending it out, she sends it into herself and learns how to deal with it. The more she learns how to deal with that, the more effective she's going to be in dealing with this board. She'll be able to take more and more responsibility. Now, Maria is not a woolly booger. And there are pieces of her that are disconnected. They're out there, just like for all of us there are. When you have somebody out here, you have what I call the woolly boogers, because I just have my own thoughts about negative beings, and I don't see them as bad. I really don't. They serve a purpose, an important one. They serve an important place in creation, and they serve an important part for all of us, because we send off pieces of ourselves out to planets or dark places or caves or wherever the hell we send them for very good reasons. And so a guardian gets set up, and that's called a woolly booger. And the woolly booger, most of the time these are cold, dark places. A piece of ours goes to, and the woolly booger becomes a guard. And they stand there, and maybe there are 2 or 3 of them. And so when you show up there, their only question to you, are you ready and are you capable of taking care of this piece of yourself? Because if you are, you can take it out of here. If you're not, we're going to keep it. And it's not about a fight. They don't want to fight with you. They just want to know. You know, and they're not beings to kill. You do not kill beings. On that level, you don't. Because they're not going to fight you. If they believe, and if you're convinced in yourself that you're really ready to take this piece on, whatever that is, they're going to let it go. Because the truth is, in creation, there are millions of beings who are out here who need that kind of protection. If you're not ready, they'll hold on to it. So it really is up to you. The more of you that you get back, the more you fill up your own house, and the less visitors you can have. Called the resonance toward abusers. That comes to a stop, huh?
How do the toxic behaviors of perpetrators fit into this? I mean, when they-
Well, that's part of the resonance. Once a child is abused, that's the resonance that gets set up. Children believe what the gods give them, which are our parents. That's part of the supposed to, unless you develop a defense and you run like hell, like is what Jay did. Jay got the hell out. Because if he didn't, he got the shit beat out of him. Pardon videotape of that. But he did, so he got out. Sheila got out. She planned it, boy, when she was 15. As soon as she was old enough, she showed up at the county judge's office and said, I want emancipation. This is what's happening. Now that, as far as I'm concerned, that judge ought to be brought up before the bar for a lot of reasons. One, a 15-year-old who's fighting for their own life and independence does not need to be put in a position of responsibility. Well, should your brother and sister be taken out? What a ludicrous question to ask. And she's going, you're the adult here. So it was another violation. Now what happens is, until healing really begins to happen, that resonance is going to keep up. That's why people who've been abused marry abusive people. Male or female, it doesn't matter. And why they abuse their kids. And it's not that they really want to abuse their kids, it's just what they know. And so the cycle perpetrates itself. But when you have some of these areas, the wood boogers help us survive. So, I remember when I really started working with this in this way, people would be stunned when I'd say, well, don't hurt them, thank them. you need to thank them. And I said, yeah, they kept you alive. They kept that piece of you safe. And you need to have some gratitude for that. Now, those beings, oddly enough, aren't used to being thanked. They're used to people hating them and that kind of stuff. So it facilitates also, eventually, their evolution. Because we are responsible for each other, not just ourselves. You know, if you look at any of the sacred traditions, the Quran, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, you read Lao Tzu for the Tao, the Native American traditions, the Wiccan traditions, any of those traditions, they're all going to tell you that we are responsible for our fellow person. In the Native world, we're responsible for the whole world. We're all related. How are you going to treat your relatives? Well, that's true on these other levels as well. Those are relatives of ours. How do you want to treat them? So they're wounded. As you do this, this gets more and more full. And she can keep all these beings out here on that board. That's fine, as long as she's in charge. Because they are incredible wealths of information for her. And it's out of that the true healers are born. There are reasons for sexual abuse. There are reasons for torture. There are reasons for all of that. And we have places that we can heal from that, because that gives us the framework and the groundwork to become healers. Not just therapists, not just administrators, not just teachers, not just, a common man, not just whatever. Because the more of this that you understand, and nobody is saying anybody has to be a therapist. But you let this world go into a crisis, it's the people who are doing this work that are going to hold the anchor for other people to come to and be grounded in. I mean, it really is. Because the terror and the panic, these people have more and more and more to ground with. So something comes up and things fall apart, and the first thing you think, oops, I better ground in right now. You don't have the luxury to react. And you don't have to react because you've done this work. And all of these beings, whether they get incorporated in or whether they stay here, is really kind of beside the point. It really is. Who knows what happens? It depends on the individual, how they do it. But these are all resources for, I meet you and, oh, I know what's happening with you. Because this got activated. Or this got activated. Or these 3 or 4 got resonated. And all of a sudden you're seeing all kinds of images, or you have all kinds of colors, or you have, however you do it. I see pictures myself most of the time. I mean, I went to see Return of the King, and for days afterward I would have flashes of pictures and get them anchored in for different aspects of that film. I mean, I do that with films. That's one of the ways I do things. Or I go off to look and I might see a particular scene. Or I'm working with somebody and I see images like visuals, like last night or yesterday in Ellie's piece, where all of a sudden I'm saying, oh, okay, cover them up. Okay, let's get some candles. Okay, you all walk around, that whole process, because that's what the images were. All I'm doing is activating my sight and letting my sight lead me about where I need to go. Intellectually, you think I have a cognition about what the hell is going on? I got news for you. But I trust my guides. And what happens, as you fill this in, you have more and more guides that you can trust. Because you can accept or say, no, I'm not willing to do that. You're still in charge. Now, all of you are developing your abilities, your gifts. People who are psychic have this to contend with. And people who are abused, here's what this looks like. Sorry, it's slow. This is the injury to our emotional nature. This is a huge mental body, and this is a huge soul. And down here is our physical self. Now what happens, particularly with abused people or whatever, if you're psychic, you've really jumped up. All kinds of crap happens, injuries are here, how you live your life, and you jump up to here and here. Now, if you develop your intuitive gifts, and the closer to from birth to about 2.5 that you stay out there in that undifferentiated space. And so you get access to all kinds of stuff. The problem is, how do you define what it is? What's positive, what's negative, who's in charge? So what happens is this information comes down, goes through the mental body, oh yeah, this is okay, I'm passed on. The only problem is, it comes down into all this crap of your life. And so here, it gets contaminated. Because this is dense. With your own personal growth, and with taking on the enormity and the bulliness of the mental body. Because the mental body can be a real bully. This opens up. And it's a little like a glass or a petri dish, not a petri dish, a beaker of mud. You put that mud into a bigger beaker, fill it up with water. This gets more diluted. Your physical nature grows because you're more secure until finally, instead of this, you got this. And this becomes a very anchored being. One who's grounded, one who knows what's happening emotionally, one who has brought the mental body really into more in containment. And go, wait a minute, don't, because you got all these mental thoughts too, the chatter that Tanya was talking about. She's got all this chatter. What do you mean you want to paint this pink? What's the matter with you? It's supposed to be white, or whatever the hell it is. And so there's a whole different kind of assessment that goes on. And people who are empaths learn how to develop boundaries, they learn how to develop all kinds of things, and assessments about when to do something and when not to do something, what the ethics are, what the morality is of that, and what their spiritual frame is. But believe me, people who have this have a problem with trust, faith, and belief. They have a problem with dreams. It's not that they can't dream, it's that they don't dream anymore of what their original dream was. They don't even remember what it is. And so what happens is, as you develop this, we all become the different family that enables the shift in faith to take place. That this is a loving place. That there is a place where you're safe, where there is a place where people can work together, there is a place where you can have community, there is a place where you can grow. Now, the psychodrama for me is a tool. It's a method to help facilitate this, and if you deal with the sociometry or the connections within the group and what needs to happen so connection can take place, which is a sociometric process, then this shifts. Now, it isn't that this beaker, or sometimes I talk about it like the house with 100 rooms. It's not that there isn't sometimes going to be sediment, and it isn't that there isn't sometimes it's going to be cloudy, because it is. We're human beings. We are always going to have to master something. But the crap that we carry can be expanded. What we're doing with Maria is strengthening this so she can take this on. And in the process, she's dealing with these issues right here. Now, all of this started when she was really, really little. And we're dealing with building a different structure. So yesterday, she created a structure, a new structure for her to stand in. And in that structure, she let 4 people from this group into her inner world that she then transferred in. And what she did is take her father and put him in a temple of healing. And he'll stay there as long as he needs to. And the temple will take care of it. And she can get on with her growth because She's been working to shift her feminine pillar, which is the emotional nature, and letting people in. Now, she's also added the shift to her own masculine pillar. So that now she can work with her ability to assert herself in a way that's going to be very supportive and healing for her. Now, people who've been tortured, and Maria was tortured, this is not a simple process, but it is a doable process if you understand what's going on and what you need to do to shift it. Each one of us, in our own ways, had something that set this up, or we wouldn't be in this group. Each person deals with it in different ways. Jay went off and got tough. Acted out in all kinds of ways that he's not doing anymore. I was talking this morning when he was in Black Hills in June with us, went up to the meeting with the natives. He's over by Needle Point and with all those elders and those stones up there. He goes, you know, I think I've decided that I want to wear the peace shirt. Now, most people don't know what that means. And I looked at him and I said, really? Are you serious? Do you realize what that means? He said, yeah, I know what it means. It means I stopped being, losing my cool. And that I have to be a being that emulates what it means. And it's always a warrior who becomes a peace shirt keeper. Always. And a warrior who has integrity, and a warrior who is willing to accept responsibility for keeping the peace. A warrior who doesn't like war, who understands what's going on. Now, that is a massive leader. And it marked a big change. And did tobacco. In front of all those elders up there. And I'm just going, oh my God. And all of us have watched how that's happened, what that's done. You know, promises and vows made out in the elements with tobacco and stuff hold weight. And they listen. So it shifts all of this. Opens this up and you get grounded in. The safety way increases. But in order to do that, you got to build a structure. And that system last night was about building a structure and the transformation of the masculine nature so that she has more power within herself and the way she expresses herself in the world to take care of herself. And moved into a place where they aren't allowed to punish her anymore. But she had to have external help to do that. So Edie, that was your role. To go in there and to support her while she took them all on and said, you can't do this to me. Now that piece happened after she sent her father off to a healing temple. And when that happened, she shifted her whole masculine nature in a big way. Mm-hmm. So now she can actively start taking care of herself and tell them they can't run over her anymore. Because she's gotten strong enough to do that. Now, if you pay attention to how all this works, you begin to, and watch the sessions that people have when we're dealing with this and learning about how do you heal. How do you use your sight? How do you use your taste? How do you use your hearing? Maria's got gifts out the wazoo. Can you smell the shit? Yeah, I can smell the shit. I can smell a whole lot more than that, and it's gross a lot of the time. When I'm working with somebody, I mean, sometimes I taste amniotic fluid and I go, whoops, I know where we are. You know, so you learn to develop your gifts over time and how to develop them and how to discern what's yours and what's someone else. And that takes some practice in the work, and that's part of the work we do. Plus, you learn how to work with the energy to move it around. Now, in self-care, when you're doing that, you also have to learn how to take care of yourselves. And you do that, and that same thing is true. In the native world, you're going to be a medicine person, you become an apprentice, and they teach you. And that takes years. And then you only get power and acknowledgement when the tribe gives it to you. In this culture, we have schools, but they don't teach anything about the gifts. They don't teach anything. That's not true. There's more and more now about how to work with energy. And there are more docs that are writing vibrational medicine and, what is that guy's name? I'll think about it in a few minutes, but, huh? Yeah, Larry Dossie. And others like him that are writing more and more about this, and they're different aspects of the mental health field, who are looking at all different aspects of this. To bring it all together is not so simple, and to develop especially empathic gifts. Empathic gifts you take everything on. And you have to develop discernment. You have to really get within yourself and go, what's mine and what's someone else's? And as you do that, your ability to be an empath develops, the boundaries develop, your skill develops, and you're far more effective in what you do. Now, Katie, where's Leslie? Is it okay if I speak about Katie a little bit?
As relates to,
Beginning. When Katie first came to the group, one of the reasons she's an empath. And she'd go into grocery stores and pick up on what people were doing across the way. She had to learn how not to do that. That was really the original goal that Katie came in with. How do you deal with this stuff? We don't have schools for empaths anymore. The mystery schools are gone. We have to build them. This is as close to a mystery school as most people are going to find, unless they're in pure metaphysics, and even the metaphysicians, the problems with them is they're not grounded. They're airy as hell because they don't do their own work. And so all of that knowledge and all of that psychic ability comes down to here, and then it goes through their crap and is contaminated with it, and they don't have any place to go. That's the other thing. It's not, I mean, you know, because most therapists, well, do you hear voices? Well, yeah, I got guys that talk to me. Let's send her to the shrink and get them on medication.
Maladol.
Yeah, alcohol city. I mean, and that's not 100% true at this point. There are docs out there like Tanya, like Madeline, like Bob Glenn that I had, who don't do that. But Bob had lived with Native people. He was English trained. He knew about a whole bunch of things. And so he didn't react to it. And Moreno had his own visions and stuff, so it was built into psychodrama, and he did that with the stage. The past, the present, or the future really didn't matter. The stage was timeless. You could go anywhere. You could have anything. You could have past lives. You could have dreams. You could have spirit helpers. You could have all kinds. They all just came into reality. It was just no problem. He really did, in many ways, equalize the field. And Jung helped a whole lot, too, with that, with the collective unconscious and with the whole structure that he built. So that's what was going on in that piece yesterday. Now, the more of this that develops, the more capability for self-care there is. But Moreno believed that with the family systems that we carried, we were raised in a social system. And to change it, you had to have a balancing system. That's what the second psychodramatic family is. That's why it's so important to create community. And, you know, so people that got trained in psychodrama really got trained for what to do about that and then stop when there's so much more. Moreno knew there was more, but it wasn't Moreno that put that boundary around it. It was the board. For X hours, and hell, I was part of that. I know how that's set up. But the truth is that once you get enough of it, you can create that out in your everyday life. You know, I mean, there was a time when the resonance in my world was pure abuse. Male or female, didn't matter. I don't hardly have any abuse in my life. And if something happens, I have my red flags. I know what to look for. And when I look, when something, like if I get a burn spot, whether it's a pop from a grease or when I'm putting something in the oven, I know instantly someplace in my life there's abuse going on. And I begin an automatic examination. I want to know where it is. And wherever it is going to stop. Because I'm just not going to have it. Or if it signals something that I'm doing to myself that's abusive, then I'm going to find out what it is and do the work. Because I am going to be whole. W-H-O-L-E, not H-O-L-E-Y. And I'm also going to be holy. H-O-L-Y. I am And each of you are sacred vessels. You are. And you have a right to have that sacredness and it not be defiled. And so that's all I have to say, unless there are questions. Any questions about any of this, anybody? Yeah.
I was wondering, like in my family system, my brother, he had the same insecurity, same wounding, and with his insecurity and fear, he would either verbally act out on people, dump on them, ridicule them, beat them up, use them, abuse them, and basically we both came up in the same environment, but I acted in instead of out.
Yeah.
And I never did abuse anybody. But
Yourself. Don't leave yourself. You abuse the hell out of yourself, Mark. That's what you learn. And it's true. The people who choose to step into more the caretaking world ordinarily turn it on themselves because they have to do something with it, not on others.
by not addressing it, I abuse myself.
But the problem is that the resonance for abuse is still there. Because, you know, we talk about psychotherapy and the ethics and all that, and the importance of doing our own work. But most people in psychotherapy, when they graduate, they quit doing their own work. So they get a certain amount done, and that's it. The problem with that is that when they encounter people, the pieces of themselves that haven't got work still want to be acknowledged and seen. So they become great caretakers, but there's always a hook, a maneuvering underneath it. That's why it's so important to continue to do your own work. Because stuff is going to come up. If we're going to work with people, those are reflections of pieces of ourselves. What are we doing with it? How do we take care of ourselves? And how do we take care of others? And the problem is, most of the time, it's outward and not inward. And this whole year is focused on going inward about what happened and how do we take care of ourselves in that process and what do we need to build in. What your brother did is another reaction to that process. And we develop hard crusts, we do all kinds of things.
Just a different defensive strategy, I guess.
That's right, it's a different defensive strategy, all of which work, and all of which keep us safe and isolated until we're able to shift that process. Any other questions?
I thought it was interesting what you said about how as people like us, as we do our own work and become more grounded, when something happens in the world, then we're the ones that help
Hold the
and
energy.
hold the energy. And I found that very interesting because I think that shot me back to 9/11 and that day. And it was so interesting to see different people's reaction. And for us, because I work in radio, the phone was ringing off the wall because we had radio stations all over the country calling, wanting to get our news feeds, and I mean, and plus the news department. I mean, it was pretty chaotic when I first got to work because of what was going on, and everybody wanted news feeds and pieces of the action and all that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, it was very interesting. There are 6 of us in our department, and out of the 6 of us, 2 of us just did what we needed to do. Me and one other guy. Another guy was kind of halfway, and it's because Owen was there. And Owen is very grounded. And so Owen continued to do his job, and he kind of pulled this other guy along with him. Another person went down in the basement where there was a television in the exercise room and just stood there by herself and watched it. And then another guy who's, I mean, he's a big guy, 4 boys, you know, football, blah, blah, blah. He sat in front of the television with tears streaming down his face. It was so interesting to see the different reactions and who was really grounded and who was able to just, you know, well, let's do what we need to do.
Yeah, and this is the work for grounding. Now here's another part of it. Really, when a crisis happens, the more grounded you are, the more you can really affect the world around you. But you can affect actually the whole picture. When Afghanistan happened, I was in Argentina in Paramus.
I got that part. You want a snowball? You want a snowball? You should see it from upstairs. Snow on my eyelashes. Angel, look at the Tanya. Do you see Auntie Tanya? It's cold.
I took a picture of the wall by trying to pull my blinds up and hold the camera in the same hand.